Good afternoon again, precious friends. Thanks for joining the Carnivore Hippie. We're back in my kitchen again. And today we're going to, well, we did the pomelo last week. Today we're going to do another one of my little guilty pleasures. Actually, not guilty because I don't indulge in guilt over this. But I have said many times I don't eat only meat. I do eat a few plant-based foods, and berries is one of the plant-based foods that I will occasionally indulge in. And so we did earlier this week, we did my carnivore bread, and I mentioned it is great toasted. And one of the things that a lot of people who go low carb or carnivore really miss is the simple pleasure of a piece of buttered toast with a little jam on it. And although it's not going to be part of your daily diet, or it shouldn't be, I don't recommend it, it's certainly something, if you do it right, that you can enjoy on occasion. So if it doesn't trip your triggers, if it doesn't trigger your cravings, if you tolerate the fruit okay, then I say, go for it. You do you. As long as you're meeting your health goals, it should be just fine. So here we go. We're going to start, as always, talking about hardware. There we go. For your hardware, you're going to need a 1.5 to 2 quart saucepan with a lid. You will want the lid so that you don't make a mess on your stovetop. Also, a canning funnel is very, very useful. It's not strictly required, but if you're going to do this on the regular basis, these are really cheap. It's what, $2 or $3 to invest in one if you're going to do this on the regular. And you are also going to need a 2-cup liquid measuring cup. This is 16 liquid ounces, or around 500 milliliters. It doesn't strictly have to have a lip. You can use a 1-cup measure, but I find being able to pour the whole thing into 1 cup and measure it out with the spout when you're working with hot liquid fruit is really very convenient and much safer. And of course, we're going to have a 1/4 teaspoon measure. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to it. A spoon for stirring, and 2 1-cup jars with lids, or you can use 1 16-ounce jar with a lid. Okay, they don't have to be the kind of lids that you use for preserving. They just have to be tight-fitting lids because, frankly, this stuff doesn't last long enough to need to be preserved in any way. It's going to get eaten. And it will last a couple of months in the fridge, which should be plenty long enough for you to actually consume it. And now, here we go on to software. This is 16 ounces of frozen blueberries. These are wild boreal blueberries from Trader Joe's. You can use any kind of blueberries you want, but I just love the flavor of these. I think the flavor is very intense, and you need less sweetener with these, I think. And we also going to have 1/2 cup of water, 1/3 cup of powdered allulose sweetener. I don't recommend erythritol for this. Erythritol can turn grainy in the finished jam. And so I use erythritol, or you can use xylitol, but that is carbier than allulose. And some people, if you react badly to allulose, but you're okay with xylitol, you can switch out xylitol, the same amount of xylitol. And also we're going to have, just to make it sweet to taste, I have some sucralose. I like to keep the amount of powdered sweetener as low as is reasonably possible, and just adjust the sweetness with sucralose, and that's what the little spoon is going to be for. Okay, in here we have the important stuff besides the fruit. This is 6 grams, which is a little bit less than a whole packet of regular old Knox style grocery store gelatin. And the reason why we've used a little bit less than a whole package, I have a gram scale, so I measure this stuff. I really recommend if you're going to do this kind of cooking, especially when you're trying to make carnivore versions of common dishes, that you get yourself a couple of scales, one that measures things in grams and ounces, and one that measures is like a jewelry scale that you can measure amounts that are less than a gram. Anyway, so this is 6 grams of gelatin powder, regular old Knox style gelatin powder, which is usually pork gelatin, but you can use beef gelatin. You could even use fish gelatin if you wanted to, or gelatin sheets. Whatever kind of gelatin you want, 6 grams will work. Now, the reason I'm using less than a whole package is usually measured out for 2 cups of liquid, which is what we're going to end up with. But the reason why I'm using a little bit less is because instead of the last gram or so of gelatin, I have added a gram of guar gum. Now, guar gum is a vegetable material. It is a vegetable, it's a dietary fiber, basically. It's a soluble fiber. Here's the little package. This is the kind I use from Modernist Pantry. And the reason I use it is because when you're doing something like spreading your jam on, say, a hot piece of toast, which is what we've been talking about all along, when it's thickened only with gelatin, as long as your sandwich or your bread is cold or your application is cold, it's fine. But if you're spreading it on a hot piece of toast, or say on a hot chaffle, or something like that, what's going to happen is the jam is going to completely liquefy. It's going to puddle up, turn to liquid, and it may just run right off your bread. Or just soak in and turn your bread super soggy. I don't really care for that. So I found that adding a little bit of guar gum stabilizes the jam just enough that it doesn't completely turn to liquid and run off your bread. All right, so if you don't want to use the guar gum, if you don't want to use any vegetable thickeners, then you just leave that out and use the entire packet of gelatin, okay, which is going to be about 7.5 grams. Okay, I think we've got enough to get started. So, first thing we are going to do excuse me, I gotta get scissors. These are hard to open. I probably should have just opened them and put them in the pan, but I wanted to show you the package. If you have a Trader Joe's around you and you can get these blueberries, yeah, they're worth it. Oh my goodness, even frozen, they smell divine. I wish you could smell them. Anyway, half a cup of water. And we're going to just throw the sweetener in to begin with. Our 1/3 of a cup of allulose sweetener. Ooh, it's puffing up. Oh, and there was one thing I almost forgot. We are going to be adding at some point a little bit of citric acid. This is my own little container. It came in a great big envelope. The reason I use citric acid is because you usually have to add acid to some fruit when you're sweetening it to keep it from tasting too candy-like, to keep the fresh flavor of the fruit. I like a lot of people, when they're making jam, they just use lemon juice. If that's what you want to do, you can go ahead and do it. It's 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid equals a tablespoon of lemon juice. But I like citric acid because it adds the acidity, it adds the tartness, but it doesn't add a lemony taste. So you can get this online. It comes in a envelope generally. I just have this little jar that I keep a portion of it in my cupboard handy. It's also good for a bunch of other stuff, so you will undoubtedly see this again if you're going to watch me making recipes. So that will come shortly. Now I'm going to do this on my rear burner because my front burner is humongous and I don't feel like having all that heat up in my face. So we're going to turn this on to high for the time being. There's enough water in there to protect it. And we're going to put the lid on it and we're going to wait until it comes to a lovely, lovely simmer. And then it's going to simmer about 15 minutes. So about 15 minutes from now is when we are going to continue on with our recipe. So I'm going to pause the video because y'all don't want to sit and watch a pot boil for 15 minutes. And I will be back and see you very, very soon. Welcome back, precious friends. Now you will see that the lid on my pan is now cocked open. The reason is because once the pan got to a full boil, I lowered the heat to medium low, something that will keep it on the kind of simmer that you're seeing here. I'm going to see if I can't get the camera closer. You see about how it's boiling? That's about where you want it to be. Now, I had it on high to start with just to get the process going. But once it got to this stage, I cocked the pan lid, because if you leave it completely closed, what'll happen is the bubbles will actually build up and spill over the edge of the pan, and you could easily have a boil over. And not only is that unpleasant to clean up and it burns the top of your cooktop, but it wastes the jam, which seems a shame to me. So once it got to the simmer that I liked, I cocked the lid and I let it cook for, that took about 5 minutes, and I let it cook for 7 or 8 more minutes after that. So this has been between 12 and 15 minutes at this point. Now, as you can see, it's very, very juicy now. There's more juice than there is berries. I wonder if we can get a better look at it going around here the other way where the light is better. Yeah, you can see it a little better here. It's more juice than it is berries. It's very, very liquid. That's good, because that means the berries have burst and they have let their juice out into the mixture. That's what's going to give you a good texture on your jam. If the liquid stayed inside the berries, then you would have a very, very heavy jam with globs of liquid spread throughout, which is unpleasant and doesn't make a very good piece of toast. So now that we are here, this is about the only technically fiddly thing about this recipe. You could, I guess, do this without the measuring, but since I'm pretty picky about the texture and consistency of my jam, I like to keep my measurements exact. And the only way to do that, the only way to know how much of this actually you need, is to know how much of this you actually have. So what we're going to do now is we are going to pour this whole thing into our 2-cup measuring cup. And we're going to see where we are with regard to having 2 cups, because that's what we want to end up with. Okay. I'm going to spoon the berries out because they're splashing. There we go. Look at that. just exactly. Well, not quite. There's about 2 1/4 cups. As you can see. Just about 2 1/4 cups. So what we're going to do is we're going to return this. First, I'm going to wipe the goop off the bottom of the pan so it won't burn on my cooktop. Whenever you're pouring liquid out of a pan, it almost always goes down the side, so be aware of that. So we're going to pour this right back into our saucepan. You can see why it's helpful not to have to use 2 measuring cups. Having a large enough measuring cup is a real good idea. Just makes the whole thing more convenient and safer when we're working with hot fruit. So we got the heat on medium again. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let this, well, medium low is probably better. We're going to let this bubble probably for about 5 to 10 more minutes until it is reduced to 2 cups. Okay? We need 2 cups of liquid in order for all this measurement to work out right. So if I was to have more than 2 cups, I would have to recalculate my weight of gelatin and guar gum, or we would have a jam which was a softer consistency that I wanted. So it is a little fussy, but that's just because I'm picky. If you don't care if your jam is a little bit softer set than a traditional jam, you can just stop at this stage and jump forward to the rest of the recipe and finish your jam. Keep in mind, it won't fit into 2 8-ounce jars. You'll have some left over, so you'll need another vessel to put the remainder in. But you can absolutely do that. But me, you know, we've already talked about I'm kind of a persnickety when it comes to this kind of thing. So we're going to let this cook another few minutes, and I will, of course, join you again when that happens. Pardon my little glitch there. I have finished cooking my blueberries, and they are right at, whoops, so you can see it, right at 2 cups. Now, I did end up cooking it down a little bit farther than actually 2 cups. And if you end up accidentally doing that, it's no big deal. You just add enough water back in, because that's all that's come out of it. You just add enough water back in to make it up to the 2 cup line or the 500 milliliter line. So now, here is our gelatin. Some people say you need to soak this. I find that when the fruit is hot, you don't need to soak it. All you need to do is stir it in. And I have stirred, of course, my guar gum powder in with my gelatin, because guar gum can get clumpy. It's not as bad as xanthan gum, but it can get clumpy, and it disperses better with the gelatin. And I have also, if you'll recall, I had the citric acid powder out. I have also added 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid powder to this and stirred it in. Okay, and now we're going to stir it right in to our fruit. Not going to dump it in a clump, because that might make it bunch up, and that can make it difficult to get it to disperse. But you can just sprinkle it in a little at a time and stir it up. If there's any clumps, you can help break them up. I'll show you. If there's any clumps, you can help break them up by putting the spoon down underneath them and lifting the spoon up through the clump, and that helps to break them up. But if you're patient with your sprinkling and stirring, shouldn't be any problem at all. For this particular recipe, you really don't need to bloom your gelatin. But you do need, it does need to be really hot and freshly hot out of the pan. And you want to just keep stirring. We're going to want to stir this for 2 or 3 minutes because we want to just make sure that all of our gelatin is dissolved. You can see sometimes it'll stick to the sides a little bit. I like to just scrape that down. Okay. Well, it looks like we are below 2 cups, just a little bit, by a couple of tablespoons. So I am going to add a little bit more water. I must have tilted the measuring cup when I looked at it. Now that it's flat, I can see it's a tiny bit below. Yeah, there we go. It's about 2 tablespoons low. I'm a measurement Nazi. That's why I have scales and way more measuring devices in my kitchen than I actually need. Okay, now. The only thing we have left to do at this point is I got my potato basher out because I thought I might need to break up some of the blueberries, but it turned out they all burst and very, very nicely, so I didn't end up needing to use them. You can see it's got a really, really nice amount of chunkiness. I like a little chunkiness. Now, you can use an immersion blender to blend this up and make a completely smooth jam if you want to. But with berries, I don't like to do that. And the reason is because berries all have seeds, lots of seeds. And when you use the immersion blender, what happens is the immersion blender cracks the seed coats on the seeds. And all of the seeds have what they call a germ inside. And the germ is the part of the seed that actually would be alive and would grow if you were going to plant it. And those little seeds can have biochemicals in them that can have a strong taste and that can react with the acid and the sweetener in your jam recipe and cause off flavors. I really don't like blending blueberries. Strawberries aren't so bad because the seeds are really tiny, but I still don't like it. Blueberries can be really bad. Blackberries are awful in the blender unless you de-seed them first. Blackberry seeds are incredibly bitter on the inside, and you can make this recipe just as it is with blackberries, but please don't put it through the immersion blender or put it in a blender because you'll regret it. It really will taste bad. Raspberries are the same way. Raspberries, blackberries, boysenberries, what's the other one? Marionberries. All of those, the seeds taste horrible if they're put through a blender, so don't. Blueberries, some people don't think they have any taste. I can taste the blueberry seeds if they're put through the blender, so I just don't do it. If I need my jam to be more broken up, I just get my trusty potato basher out, or I put it through a food mill. Because that's how I like to roll. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to taste this. And to avoid putting my fingers in, of course, nobody else is going to eat it. Nobody else but me and my hubby are going to be eating it, really. But just here's a quick how to taste something when you don't want to put your fingers in it and you don't want to put the spoon in your mouth and you don't want to go through spoon after clean spoon trying to taste it. So here's what you do. You take the spoon, you put a drop of it. Don't touch the spoon to your hand. Put a drop of it on the back of your hand. and lick it off the back of your hand. Make sure there's no lotion on your hand, though. Fortunately, I can separate the taste of the lotion from... There's no lotion on the front of it. Or you could put it on your wrist, too. So, yeah, that's lovely. Now, I did say that we're probably going to have to adjust the sweetness a little bit. And we are. So, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of the liquid Splenda, which is about 2 packets of powdered Splenda, which I don't use because I don't like maltodextrin. But if that's what you have, you can go ahead and use it. It's probably going to only add about 2 grams of carbohydrate to the whole recipe. But still, I like this kind, so this is what I keep on hand. So we're just going to use it. 1/4 teaspoon. Boop. Don't put this in your mouth with the Splenda liquid on it. Bluck. Okay, I'm going to stir this up. And then we're going to do our taste again. Whoops. Yep, it's getting there. I want it sweet enough so that a tablespoon will be enough. I don't want to feel like I need to like glob giant amounts on. I want it sweet enough and tart enough that I'll get a big hit of fruit flavor when I use 1 tablespoon, which is about going to be between 1 and 1.5 grams of carbs. Hi again, folks. I have no idea what's going on. My phone has a tendency to, at some point, just turn off in the middle of a video. So I don't know. I may end up having to completely redo this, but I'm going to continue on with the hope that I can somehow salvage it. I don't know why my recording turned off, but it did. Here we go. I just put the second measurement of Splenda liquid in, second 1/4 teaspoon, and I'm about to taste it again. That seems about right on, but what I am going to do is I used a 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid, and I don't think that was quite enough. These blueberries are quite earthy in flavor, and I think we would benefit with a little bit more. Since I used this for the Splenda liquid, I'm not going to use the regular end for the citric acid. Since I only need a teeny tiny bit, I'm going to use the back end. That's going to be probably not even a gram. That's going to be about 1/8 teaspoon. Okay. Here we go. Oh yeah, that's lovely. I like my jam sweet, but also tart because it goes so well with butter that way. And you get a big hit of fruit without having to put a big giant globs. Just a tablespoon is enough. So now we're going to jar up our jam. These are 2 1-cup containers, so we should get 2 jars out of it because we've made 2 cups. I'm going to spoon the initial one out because it tends to splash. So we ended up with a 1/4 teaspoon plus a pinch of citric acid, and we ended up with a 1/2 teaspoon of Splenda powder, Splenda liquid. Add it in. Not quite. There we go. There we go. 1 8-ounce jar. And this one should be low enough that we can safely pour it. Whoops. Now, I don't know why, as carefully as I ever measure, I always have a little bit left over, but that's okay. Because I'll just save that and put it on some Greek yogurt. Or I'll see if I can fit it into the rest of this jar. Fit it into this jar. Nope, not quite. But I got about a tablespoon or a tablespoon and a half that I can put on some Greek yogurt, which I have in the fridge. So now we need to wipe the rims of the jar lids with a wet paper towel. Now, these jars must be kept in the refrigerator because, number one, obviously, the gelatin needs to be kept cold. And number two, this jam has no sugar in it. It won't be preserved in the same way that regular jam will be. But, as I said, this will keep a month in the refrigerator. And it will easily be eaten up within a month. There we go. Nice and tight on our lid. Here we go once again. All right. Well, as soon as I get my technical glitches figured out, I will publish this. I was hoping to publish it tonight. Doesn't look like that's going to happen, but anyway. This usually takes at least overnight to set up. So I will make another little short video to show you. Also made some strawberry earlier. You can use the exact same recipe to make the strawberry. And I used also a pound of frozen strawberries. So I will show you how they set up, and I'll show you what they look like, and I'll show you what they look like on a piece of the carnivore bread toast that I made. And but for now, we're going to put this in the refrigerator, and I hope you try this. If this is something you feel like you can add to your diet, or it's also really great to have around the house for people who you would like to see transition to a low-carb way of eating, because I guarantee you, people who are not low-carb will like this. And they'll be happy with it. Okay? I love you all. I bid you peace, love, and meat. And I will talk to you again very, very soon. Bye.